Hey guys, welcome to the LBR Records podcast. We're back again, this time with James Hinchliffe from the Shamble. Say hello.
Hello everyone.
This time we're doing it and he's not in the room with me, so it's going to sound a bit different, but I hope you still appreciate our cool little conversations we're going to have about musics and tell me about yourself, James.
Well, I'm obviously the vocalist and the lyricist for the hit band, the Shamble, on Lucky Boy Records, of course. We sort of formed the band about 2 years ago, and I was in my second year. The guitarist was in his first year. We both united over a love of all things 80s and all things Smiths related.
Yeah.
And kind of went from there, built a little band together.
We talked a bit with Jordan about the Shamble last time I had an episode on, and it was interesting because we were talking about bands and singers and what it's like being a solo man as opposed to a group, and he was talking about how you and Donna's met because that's how the Shamble started. Had you been in like a band before that, or was that the first one?
So kind of prior to forming with Donna's, I had done a little stint with a kind of with some of my cousins, and we'd been a Kooks cover band.
Oh right.
So I'd sung, well, not necessarily Kooks. We were just sort of a cover band doing little things. We did a lot of Kooks stuff. That was kind of when I decided I didn't want to really be playing guitar on stage. It was around that point, because they'd often leave me. They'd all off to get a drink, and I'd be there left with my acoustic guitar playing some Poncy Kooks thing because no one else was there, and I was like, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, I think it's quite obvious when I've seen you live as well that you do absolutely love not having a guitar, because most people feel a lot more confident when they're holding an instrument and singing, but when I see you on stage, you're literally just dancing and just making the most of the stage without anything else. I think it's awesome.
I mean, that was always a part of it. I wanted to dance around and look a bit silly and have fun, just, you know.
It's a really important thing not to be too serious in music, but actually say something really important when you're doing it.
Yeah, I think especially with Shamble lyrics and the way I write them, it was in danger of becoming a very kind of sour experience. There's a lot of bitterness, a lot of sadness and resentment and things that go into the lyrics, and I think if you're not looking like you're having fun on the stage, that could really kind of impact on the mood, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely, I definitely agree with you. It's interesting. We're going to talk a lot about lyric writing, I think, in this episode, because you started as a poet, right?
I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah, and that I can't recall you telling me that if you've ever like performed your poetry live, or if in like a performance setting has only really been as a singer. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first sort of started writing poetry, the thought of reading it aloud was something that I would never have wanted. I sent it off a lot to kind of publications to get it published so other people could read it in the meter they chose, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it was only when I begun to kind of write poems that had a very distinctive meter that I begun to want to put them to music, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came, as I sort of said earlier, from this Smiths heavy inspiration, where I'd sort of come from quite a rough school in Essex, a place where sort of to be anything remotely different was rejected and shunned and used as a kind of leverage to bully and to pick on people. And when I kind of discovered the Smiths and Morrissey in particular, and I sort of saw this person who was the antithesis of everything the 80s stood for, being successful and being loud and talking about his awkwardness with the world around him.
Yeah.
That was something that I wanted to be for someone else.
Yeah, that's something you like confided in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you, I guess it's quite interesting then going from like school to uni, like the differences, because I think schools for a lot of people can feel there's quite a bit of gang mentality there, and I think it's really easy to kind of just like not feel like you can be yourself in a situation like that. But when you come to uni, there's so many different kinds of people that I think you finally come into your own. You can be who you want to be and do what you want to do, really.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. I think if you're coming to university and not finding your passion and yourself, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because if you start as doing poetry, I say this to a lot of people that when I'm talking about the Shamble and like the lyrics, I find it really cool how you can really tell there's quite a clear focus on lyric writing as well as like the songs themselves. Because Donna's, when he writes the music, which he's done for the majority up to now, it sounds really great. But alongside that, you've got these amazing like lyrics which you write about, which cover all different kinds of like concepts, but they're all well thought through. I think with a lot of artists you find nowadays on the radio or just like generally, it's quite easy to like put lyrics in which people could consider, if you look into it, as like throwaway lyrics, which you don't really know what they're trying to say. But I guess, do you think that with every single song you're trying to make like a different point?
Yeah, no, 100%. And there's sort of an odd kind of battle between the number of songs that are very, very personal to me and the number of songs that are about a kind of concept or an idea. A lot of the times I write from a completely different person's perspective.
Yeah.
And other times I'm writing from my own perspective. But I think I start with the song title before I have any words,
Sure.
which kind of tunnel visions me down a kind of a route that I want to make a point about.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have the idea of what I want to say before I say it, and then the lyrics come second.
Yeah. Especially because you come from a background which isn't so well. I guess you do come from a musical background, but the way you write isn't really focused on like melody first. That's definitely. Would you say melody? It's not an afterthought, but the main when you're writing, it's mostly lyrics. It's not the melody. That's something which is kind of inspired by Donna's and what he gives to you.
I don't know actually, because I like to think that, or the way I kind of view Shamble's stuff is that the music exists in one pocket, and the kind of lyrical melody exists in another. And if you were to listen to each of them separately, you wouldn't kind of believe they'd fit. And then they kind of marry in the song.
Mm-hmm.
I put quite a lot of thought into lyrical melody because that's kind of where the power of the words comes from.
Yeah.
If it's not catchy, if it's not something that people can shout or sing sadly, it's not going to have any effect. So I put a fair bit into lyrical melody, but I think making a good point and saying something important is a little bit more of a focus, maybe.
Yeah, I think I can definitely tell when I'm listening to your music and comparing it to some of the artists on the record label as well. Even like someone like Kraken, when I was playing in that, I feel like a lot of the songs which Freddie was writing, it was kind of like pent up aggression, but in a very like cool way of trying to just express what his life was like before uni. And because he had a song called Hey Look It's Me, which was, I think, entirely about how the band was going at the time. And I guess it's a very it's a different way of writing, because I know a lot of your stuff, I know it's really hard to kind of like try and put a certain theme to someone's writing, because it's really easy to write about so many different things. That's what makes a good songwriter, I think.
Well, I mean, a lot of my lyrics, and more specifically within certain songs, there's a lot of self-critique there that's kind of subtly tucked in. So sort of in Seen Better Days, which is an outcry against kind of generic indie bands, there's a sort of a line in there which says his lack of talent isn't redeemed by how he's come dressed. Yeah. Which is actually sort of a reference to me not necessarily being the strongest vocalist in the world, and showing up in my flowery shirts and dancing around the stage. That doesn't actually redeem my lack of talent, unfortunately. Yeah. And there's lots of that throughout all the songs. I mean, I've learned my lesson, for example, which has recently been released in on the live EP. Yeah. That's all about my school days, and the kind of final of that is a rather large flaw of mine, which is it happened to me, it should happen to them. Bitterness breeds bitterness again, and that's my kind of weakness. That's me being pathetic and petty and wanting people to suffer the way I did, which is, of course, a very flawed attitude to have. But
yeah, because the thing is with that song, it's really nice how now that I know that, or you told me before, I remember, but now that you told me that that's the whole kind of story behind that song, it's quite. Do you think it's quite funny how there's like a bit of irony calling it like "Learnt My Lesson" when it's about like school?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what I was really going for there is, I mean, there's a couple of things going on there. I mean, there's a massive flaw in our education system, which I won't go too into now. We want to turn this into a Brexit debate.
Oh, well, going straight from debating about schools to Brexit is a big jump, but
bloody Ian Duncan Smith, am I right?
oh my God, here we go.
But it's it's more of a kind of social lesson, I think, is what you actually get taught at school, or at least what I did.
Yeah.
Which is obviously in the kind of, I've learned my lesson, but never how to spell. I never felt like I was actually nurtured or taught, just despite having this kind of affection for poetry. I never had that nurtured out of me.
Yeah.
And instead, all I was taught is that actually the world is quite unkind and people are quite cruel. And that was sort of the bitter, twisted message I took from it, unfortunately. So
yeah. It's a shame.
What the song's about.
I think it's a shame because it happens to a lot of people. But I think the way that you kind of sum it up in that song is quite cool. And I think I'll play it later in the podcast, just to kind of like test out and talk about the differences between how it is recording a live session, which we did, and the studio stuff, which we did earlier this year. Because I think with that comes a lot more control when you can do things one bit by one bit, as opposed to playing it all at once. But how the live recordings came out were really nice, because it was so raw, but you could hear everything really clearly, and everything was so tight because you're all just playing at the same time.
Yeah, no, it was a really, really wonderfully done. Actually, I showed all my family the video that Don has put together of the live recordings.
Yeah, and we got sent that today, and it was really nice to see how that all came together.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, it's one of the clearest kind of live recordings I've ever heard. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that. Packing like 7 people in like a studio, and just like trying to get as much done in like the space of time we had. But it was a lot of fun just doing that, and having a bit of stress when you're doing I think recordings of any kind is it ends up being a lot more rewarding at the end of it, because you're just like, oh, the stress is over, the song's done, it sounds great, and I think that's what some of the best part of recording.
Oh God, definitely. Being incredibly kind of stressed and pressed for time last term with the masters and everything.
Yeah.
To kind of finally see the product of that time is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Oh, I love recording, especially with you guys. It's because it makes it a lot easier when you've got a lot of competent musicians in one room just doing their thing. I think especially recording as well as writing is some of the most therapeutic thing you can do. In my opinion anyway, just through experience. Who was I talking to about this? I was talking to the drummer of another band who aren't at uni anymore, unfortunately, but the drummer of Jerry, Adrian. I was talking to him when I recorded their band a couple of months ago now, and he was saying how writing music is the most therapeutic thing you can do. He is an artist as well, and that's interesting hearing him talk about the differences between like music and drawing. Because one is a lot more symbolic and one's meant to be taken quite lyrically anyway.
Yeah.
Do you think people should take all of your song lyrics completely literally? Like, I mean, I think people find it quite hard to separate the art from the artist. I
mean, it is me on display there. So yes, I think they should take it literally, and I think, there's a very veiled, unfortunately. So I think if you are producing something like lyrics or like poems, they're a reflection of you and they're your innermost thoughts, and they should be taken as literally as possible. And I think if you're writing art in an authentic way to disguise an idea or to pander to an audience, it's awful art. It should be a true reflection of your mind, your heart, everything, and you can't go half-heart with that. Or you end up with something like a Ariana Grande record that's written by 11 suits round a table. I mean, that's not art. That's rubbish.
Yeah, I think I talked to Jordan about this as well because I'm big on having music being authentic as possible, and the way that Jordan was talking about him playing rockabilly for the first time is that it's that kind of genre of music, especially with a lot of older genres, because of the limited technology they had. Basically, they had to be talented and they had to write really good stuff on their own because they didn't have access to things you have nowadays. Because it's so easy to like make a song on your laptop and put loads of autotune on it, and you can kind of hide the fact that you don't have much talent. And I think that goes into songwriting as well because definitely with people like Ariana Grande and like I guess even like Ed Sheeran, who have like 11 people helping them like write like hit songs and stuff, there is like no genuine art there. I think you are right.
Oh no, definitely, and this is a subject I talk about a lot. I think in the lyrics of Shamble stuff. I think for songs like Don't Mention It, that will be released as a single fairly shortly,
soon,
in the new year.
Yeah,
there's a lot in there about being authentic and turning what you have experienced, what you have lived, into pretty art. Something as mundane as playing chess in a pub with your best friend can be turned into very pretty art, which is the point I was trying to make in that song.
Yeah, because I find the way that I write stuff, when I try and make something authentic, I find it very hard to do it without talking about things which are very personal to myself. And the hardest part of doing that is trying to make a point and trying to protect your own feelings when you're talking about them, because you don't want to like put your entire like heart on your sleeve. You want to do it in a way which is constructive and it has like a genuine point which people can take and like take away from it.
Yeah, and there's definitely a balancing act, I think, between your true emotion and the kind of relatability of what you're saying.
Definitely. That's something which I really admire because it's hard to get that right.
I mean, I know from talking to you and reading your lyrics how deeply personal the songs are. But the kind of way that you use kind of veiled nicknames and veiled kind of metaphors for things, it kind of disguises it to the layman that doesn't know you.
Mm-hmm. Before I came to uni, I wrote a few things, but I was always seen as like second best to some of my other music friends who I was in the music scene with, and I was always seen as just like a guitarist. But it's interesting coming here and learning so much more about songwriting from like people like you, or working with like Freddie from Kraken, or a lot of the other bands who I've been in the studio with, even like JJ from Dear Ramona. It's interesting seeing how everyone writes. And it's really nice being able to write together with other people, because we've tried to write together at one point, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Take a Bullet for Your Juliet, I think was ours, wasn't it?
It's a very poetic name.
Incredibly so.
Yeah, it is really cool writing in different, like basically just like challenging yourself to write in different ways. I think is a very important thing to do, because I think it changes your kind of perspective as a songwriter, and I think it really helps you basically just become a better one, I think. Have you ever like, because I know you write songs in your own way, have you ever like gone out of your way to write your songs in a different way to how you normally would?
I don't know, actually. I tend to, I have a lot of trouble kind of switching off, just in general. And so I always have just lines upon lines and Word documents with 7,000 words on them of just random thoughts and things.
Yeah.
And I mean, typically, whether I'm sat with someone or whether I'm given a recording or whether we're working on something, I'll always have that kind of initial idea there. And I've never really tried to go in completely blind with something, which might be quite an interesting thing to try.
I think it is. I think it is interesting, because I think when you hear of like bands who have like more than one vocalist like writing together, I think that's a really like impressive thing, because I think people can really take the limelight when writing songs, and to be able to have two voices in which give one coherent message, I think is quite an impressive thing to do. I'm just trying to think of some examples of bands who have two vocalists and do that. I guess maybe the Pixies. I don't know if the Pixies write together, but when there was those two people who were like, when they were at the top of their game back in like the early 90s, I think they might have written together. Were you ever a fan of the Pixies, or was that Donnelly who was like really into them?
I like the Pixies. Yeah, Beatles absolutely hates them.
Oh right, I think that was the point which was made in the studio, that Beatles hates the Pixies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big one for me of kind of two songwriters and two different voices would be the Libertines.
Oh right, okay.
Carl Barrow and Pete Doherty both write lyrics and music.
Sure.
At the same time, which is a sort of a bizarre exchange, and you can really tell because Pete Doherty's obviously come from a background of poetry. Carl Barrett's come from a background of guitar playing, and they've kind of worked together to teach each other how to do the other's craft, and it gives this really interesting kind of back and forth.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, because didn't you just saw the Libertines a couple of nights ago, didn't you?
I did, yeah, on the 19th, 2 nights ago.
How was that?
Yeah, it was mental. We were on the kind of, well, we got to the front to watch the supports. There were about 5 different support acts.
Okay.
2 bands, 1 solo musician, and 2 poets. And the minute the Libertines came on, the whole place erupted like a carpet. The people jumping around.
Oh my god!
And I had with me, who's very little. Oh
god!
We didn't last at the front for too long.
I looked at some of the videos, and it was very amusing to like see the amount. It looked like it had just been like a battlefield, because there was like bodies everywhere. I think there was like 10 people crowd surfing at once. It looked insane. It looked really crazy.
Oh, it was incredible. It was a really, really, really great gig. And you sort of never know what Libertines you're going to get. Is the problem. Like, are you going to get coked up Libertines? Are you going to get healthy Libertines? Are you going to get sleepy Libertines? And I think Pete was quite sleepy.
Yeah.
He was quite tired.
I mean, it didn't look like the crowd were tired at all.
The crowd weren't. I think it's the end of their tour of their new album. So
I remember when I went to Reading Festival in 2015. This was like, I mean, more than 4 years ago now. And I was a little bab, basically. But I don't really remember. I didn't catch much of their set because this was back in that school when I was in a metal band. So a lot of my friends were just trying to drag me away from music like that. But look at me now.
Writing Christmas songs.
Yeah, writing like 1,000 Christmas songs. But yeah, oh my God. That festival was insane. Festivals are very interesting compared to like actual shows. I don't know.
I can't stand festivals.
Have you? Yeah, I think I remember you saying. Have you ever been to a festival?
I have. When I was very young, like 15, 16, I went to the festival.
Yeah, it sounds like you haven't had a very positive experience.
Oh, they're just dirty and no one's there for the music.
Oh.
You know, when you go to like an individual gig, everyone there is there for the proper reason. They want to see this band, you know. Like one of the best gigs I went to was was the Skints, which is sort of a reggae fusion band. And, you know, everybody who was there knew all the words to all the songs, just like you did. You know, there was none of this, I'll just, I'll show up, I've heard of them, I'll go.
Yeah.
It was proper. There wasn't any piss getting thrown around. Wonderful. Clean.
Nice. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of the like festivals are a really, really good way for like actual music fans to get into new bands. But if you're looking to get an actual proper live gig experience from a specific band, you're probably not going to find it there. But that's okay, because that's what festivals are like. And I think it's quite a commercial kind of event when you go to a festival, which is a bit of a shame. But I do think it is quite handy when you're trying to find a new band and you just want to spend a weekend, for some reason, camping and just having a really disgusting time, but also a really good time if you go to the right ones. I think.
Oh no, I can't stomach it.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, my dad's the same, and you're just like my dad. Just you can't. You don't want to.
I've been told that before.
Well, you're just like my dad.
Just like your dad.
I'm sure you're a very dad-like figure, and I think that's very nice.
Apparently, I popped out the womb at 50.
Oh my god, that's gross.
I'm just 50 years old since birth.
You're Benjamin Button.
I am.
Anyway, I think we're gonna take a little break and play you the live session of I've Learnt My Lesson, which we were talking about earlier. Just before that's being played, do you want to talk about it again, like a little bit, like any heads up before people get exposed to this awesome tune?
Yeah, I'll give a little talk.
Do it.
I suppose. A little intro.
Do it.
It's just sort of about my kind of school experience. About this kind of, especially where I'm from, it's a very kind of masculine culture, very aggressive culture, and about how much I kind of despise that and how much I kind of suffered through it as I was younger and didn't enjoy a second.
Poor little James. No, it's a good message to put across. I think you've done it really well. But yeah, listen to this. This is the live session from their new EP, just the one take actually. So here it is. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, we just heard I've Learnt My Lesson, the live session from the Trevor Jones studio, which is the main studio in the music department of University of York. As a music and sound recording student, I'm very, very thankful to be able to get access to that facility because, oh my god, it's amazing. It's seriously professional and really cool.
Oh god, yeah.
It's so good.
Oh god.
I think when we've been in there to do the Shamble stuff, it's always just made things so much easier just to like plug things in and just get going straight away, and it feels nice as well. The sofa in the control room is a bit annoying.
Don't talk to me about that sofa.
I mean,
that
it's
dastardly
fine.
Sofa.
Yeah, so we just heard I've Learnt My Lesson. What was the most fun part about doing the live sessions for you?
Oh, it was just like a kind of practice with your mates, wasn't it? It was being able to sort of dance around with this proper sort of studio quality headset in your ear and then being able to listen back to them. Mm-hmm. It's a luxury you don't get in the practice room, being able to hear them again.
Do you feel a lot more in control and just generally cool with a headset on there?
just being able to hear myself makes such a wonderful difference to practicing.
Oh, I can imagine.
Hence why I'm going to be investing in a in-ear monitor over this Christmas.
Wowee, that's going to be your main Christmas present.
It is, yeah. I'm asking for money from people so I can pull it all together and buy one of those.
Oh, that'll be awesome. I hope you figure out how they work, because I can't even imagine how you can set those up properly. Well, I haven't even looked into it. It just seems a bit... It seems a lot of work, but I think when you're a vocalist, it probably makes it worth it, because it makes the whole like feeling of playing live so much like easier to kind of like track yourself of what you're doing.
I'm just a bit fed up with kind of gig venues not really having proper sound checking facilities, and it's really frustrating when you're kind of an inch in front of the drum kit. You just can't hear a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Summer Ball.
That's such a thing.
I think for anyone who's ever tried to perform, whether it's singing, guitar, anything, everyone who's ever tried to perform on stage knows if you can't hear yourself and what you're doing, it'll be sloppy.
Yeah.
And it seems like the sort of sound techs, especially even very professional venues who've never really been on stage and are just sound techs, don't really understand that, how kind of crucial that is for the person on stage to be able to hear themselves. So I always find myself kind of bringing my monitor up of my voice to the very peak that it can go, just so I can hear just that little glimpse of my voice, so I know how I'm sounding.
I think it's really important that sound engineers in general should have experience in performing, so they know exactly what it's like. Because I think when you have that kind of experience where you know what it's like on stage and you can't hear what's going on, it's very, very, very frustrating.
Oh yeah. Oh god, yeah. I mean, you know as well as I how frustrating it is.
Yeah, especially when you're playing in a band where the drummer's like a very, very loud player. I think, as we both know, me especially, but with the drummers who have been in and out of the Shamble, it's nice that you settled on one now, Adam, who's absolutely amazing, who you heard just now in that live session. It's very interesting hearing people's different approaches to it, but all the good drummers seem to be loud. That's the thing. So
yeah, he seems to absolutely whack that kit. He gets a lot of noise out of that kit,
but it does sound great.
It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, he's a fantastic drummer. Keeps time brilliantly.
Yeah. So the live session we heard then, that's new. It's entirely new members. This is literally the first time people have been able to hear the entirely new Shamble, which has basically been halved and then doubled again with the cool new members of Adam and Tom taking over bass and drums. It's completely changed. It's changed dramatically. I think it's quite a bit more concise, I think, now.
Yeah, and there's a lot more of a drive towards this kind of funky edge, especially with Tom Beatles on bass. He brings this big funk influence into the band, which, again, I think you can hear a lot in I've Learned My Lesson.
Yeah.
And then we've got this very rockabilly, very heavy drum in from Adam. And it just takes us just that little bit further away from just sounding like a kind of generic jangle pop band, and takes us into this pocket of uniqueness, I think, which is what we've been searching for a little while.
I think you definitely achieved that. Because I think the songs as well, like the songwriting is getting even better. And I think it's really nice how Tom is having an input into the musical songwriting of the band as well.
Yes, it's wonderful. He's absolutely prolific.
Yeah.
Well, over this Christmas period alone, it's sort of, there's been 8 songs that he's just been emailing me and uploading to our shared drive, and I've been sat and just working on lyrics for them this whole Christmas, and it's wonderful. We've got, as I say, sitting on 8 new songs that have not even been practiced yet.
That's amazing. That kind of output is so good for especially a student band, because kind of you can pick and choose your best tracks, and if you have like a load of songs, you can choose the best ones out of those, and then the best ones out of those, and then you just have like such a solid group of songs. And if you're just writing all the time, we're just gonna have the best set list.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going for. Building this big collection and we can just nib at different ones and release them as singles or build an album or do whatever we need to do with them. We have them now.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy for a lot of bands and people when they're writing to be like, oh, I've written one song, it took me so much time, let's record it and put it out, done, that's all we need to do.
Yeah, it's quite lazy doing that, I think.
I think it's lazy, but I think a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to have the output which you guys have, which I think I'm quite jealous of, really. I find it really hard to write songs when I'm trying to write music and I can't figure out how to rhyme.
I don't really know where it kind of comes from. I mean, Beatles is sort of a fountain for musical theory knowledge. Mm-hmm. And my kind of lyric writing comes from a lot of kind of a place of things that upset me or anger me. And I hate everything, so there's a lot to write about.
Yeah, I think it is. We've talked a bit already about the stuff you write about. Comparing it to a lot of the bands who have been in and out of the York scene, because there hasn't been that many prolific bands come out of the student side of York, really ever, apart from the band Jerry, who are doing quite a bit, but. I don't know. What do you think of the York music scene?
Well, I mean, there could be room for growth. Yeah, and I think these kind of indie edgy venues like Spark are kind of the beginning of that. Yeah. Potentially, they have the potential to be the beginning of that, but there's not much of one at the moment. Mm-hmm. I know when we first started, when me and Donna started writing together, and we sort of looked through the main bands, and it was either covers bands or heavy metal bands. Yeah. And I don't consider either one of those a particularly good genre of band. And we were sort of one of the few kind of indie bands at the time. I think now there's a few more kind of coming out. I don't want to put that down to us. It wasn't. I think it's just indies kind of coming back into fashion a little bit. Yeah. And so a lot more bands are forming, but there's definitely room for a bigger music scene in York for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the thing is with the York music scene is that it's less of a music scene. It's more of because the amount of pubs and bars there are in York, there's a ton of open mics everywhere, basically every single night, which I think is incredible. I think people should definitely take advantage of those as much as possible. But in terms of building up an image for a band, it's very, very hard to kind of do that. I find a lot of bands who take themselves. Who want to take themselves really seriously outside of York go straight to Leeds. I think that's a really easy thing to do, but it is very unfortunate that York doesn't have that. I mean, we have the Fulford Arms, which is quite a nice venue, but it's the only one really which people can take advantage of as a student band, which is close by, because travel is always an issue when you're at uni. You don't have a car. Yeah. What do you think is the best venue you've played in New York?
Definitely the Fulford Arms is up there as one of the best venues. We did a little festival, the Merrion Street Festival in Leeds, which was quite good. Mm-hmm. In terms of York venue, we'd love to get on. The Crescent would be the big one. Fibbers was always quite a nice venue as well, but now that's gone. So it's a shame. Yeah, there's been quite a few venues shutting down, not just in York, but I mean everywhere. I think with how the industry is going, and especially because a lot more people are starting to live in the UK, and just generally there's more apartment complexes coming up and everything. There's a lot more noise complaints, and it just is the spiral to the closing of venues. A lot of my local venues back in Milton Keynes have been a threat of closing down multiple times, and it's very scary. Because it can just completely destroy the live music scene. Yeah, and that's a really kind of important thing as well for kind of new bands coming up. Yeah. I mean, we can't have much faith in the money robbers that are Spotify anymore, and there's we need these live sets to get our name out there.
It kind of makes it impossible.
In an oversaturated market.
It does just make it kind of impossible for a lot of new bands to just do stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just what the world's like now. But I feel like it's a shame how the most money you can make from being a band is merchandise. That's what I find. It's really just the only thing you can do if your main focus is to make money anyway as a small band, but when people start off, it's not really about that. It's just about making stuff you like and that you hope your friends like.
Yeah, it's about making art, I think. That's what it's always been for us anyway, and I think for you as well. There are definitely bands who are in music for the completely the wrong reasons, or aren't saying anything important and aren't saying anything valuable. And it might sound very arrogant for me to sit here and claim that what I'm saying or what I'm spouting on about is in some way important.
Yeah.
But I think if you feel like you have something, there's no point in trying to hide that from the rest of the world. Everyone in the Shamble is fully behind our music, and I would think everyone in the Shamble would say the same as me, where we think we've got something a little bit more special that isn't just generic and boring indie pop that other indie bands, even in the York area, seem to be churning out.
Yeah. I think it's really important that you believe in your own music if you're going to play it. I was saying this earlier, but if you don't love what you're playing, then you wouldn't play it. I think it's really important to make something which you're proud of. Otherwise, other people wouldn't like it. People can't like your music if you don't like it. That's the thing.
Oh, exactly. Completely. I mean, especially in sort of a live setting, if you don't look like you're enjoying playing your music. And that seems to be a theme in music bands at the moment is, you stand at the front and you pout and you look grumpy. It's like, I don't think that's how it should be. You should be dancing, you should be happy, you should show how you feel about the music. Yeah.
Can you think of any bands that come off the top of your head right now who you would think who are good examples of that?
I mean, for me, this sort of surge of that 1975-esque music is boring to me. Bands like Two Door Cinema Club I find very boring and mediocre, and bands like the Sherlocks, who pose in their all black jeans in front of derelict buildings. It's boring. That doesn't mean anything. Give me something to work with. Dig a little deeper.
I feel like you talk about this quite a bit, which I think it's good that you talk about it.
I just don't. I think music is a very pure form of art, and it's a way that it's one of the few remaining forms of art that can exist, and it's beginning to wean and die a little bit. And I think if you really want to make a statement, especially for the youth who are horrifically oppressed at the moment, in my opinion, one big way to kind of rally them and bring a youth to a cause, and whether that's dissatisfaction with the current political climate or whether that's dissatisfaction with how the actual climate is being handled, a big rallying call for our generation is something that is needed. We need a kick up the backside to get us into shape.
Yeah.
And no band's done it yet, because bands are far more content writing poxy love songs or love songs about getting drunk.
Yeah.
And that doesn't satisfy me. That's not what I want. It doesn't say anything to me.
It is strange to me how that is the case, because I can tell from, well, of course, into the Shamble stuff, but a lot of bands who are doing relatively well but haven't quite made it. They have written stuff which is quite important, and they do give a lot of good messages. One of the most successful bands that I know who actually put across some really good messages for not even just our generation, but generations around ours, are a band called Idols, who I think you probably have heard of. They're like a punk band.
Yeah.
They're probably not your kind of music, but the message they put across is really great.
Oh yeah, Idols are great. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really cool. I haven't seen them live, but I'm a big fan of the ideas which they're bringing across, and the whole talk and take on toxic masculinity and unity.
Yeah, it's certainly a kind of turbulent time.
Yeah.
Where it's become a very us and them narrative with whatever side you're on in this kind of big nationwide debate. They are the other side of the enemy, and yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely sort of cries. There's a massive generational difference as well, and I touch on that a lot, I suppose, in the lyrics as well, especially in songs like Two Black Eyes, which is, for all intents and purposes, an angsty teen rejection song, and other songs that have recently been written, like One Pack Horse, which is sort of about the older generation becoming obsolete and complaining about the youth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely a topic that needs to be mentioned, and I don't really see many people doing it at the moment. And I think there's definitely room to rally a rally our generation behind something, behind a cause. Music should definitely be used to say something relevant and important.
Yeah.
Not about don't waste the kind of stage that you're given.
Yeah.
To say something about something crass and crude like getting drunk or doing drugs or swearing about sex. It's a waste.
Yeah. The next one we're going to hear is actually going to be "Seen Better Days."
Yes, the first EP.
Yeah, ages ago, because that was done so differently to the songs which are currently putting out. Because obviously
it's a different band.
Well, I mean, yeah, half the band was different, and it's basically, yeah, you are right. It's basically a completely different band. You can still tell it's the Shamble all the way through. Even from then, comparing it to the stuff going out now, it's still the same band.
Yeah, it's. I think the songwriting's the same. It's still me and Donna's. I'm still doing the lyrics and lyrical melody, and he's still doing the guitar. But I think the kind of root notes played on the bass and the kind of slightly disjointed drumming are made excruciatingly apparent now, and it's something that we really want to go back and re-record with our new members, because it's a crowd favourite. It's a review favourite as well. But we just want to, we think that the other two guys now in the band make it a little bit more cohesive, perhaps. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think I've heard it. I haven't really. Well, I think I've heard you guys play it with the new band, but I can't remember it that well because the thing is, with "Seen Better Days," when I was mixing it, I listened to it 100 times. I've only heard the newer version with the new band once, so it's hard to kind of compare. But I think I'm quite proud with how it turned out. I think you were as well at the time. But I think
the mixing of it and everything was absolutely top notch. It's just we find it's the sort of drumming and bass playing feels a bit outdated compared to our newer stuff now.
Yeah, it's just what you're used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, have a listen to this track from their EP, Heart on Our Sleeves, Heart on Your Sleeve. Oh, I can't remember.
Heart on Our Sleeves.
There you go, you got it. My brain's having a bit of a fart. I'm sorry. But yeah, this is "Seen Better Days."
Motivation now. You're just an indie man, laying down those indie plans. You want her, the song's about her. You've made it quite obvious. Don't see you won't glance in
Okay, so we just heard "Seen Better Days." Yeah, you can tell that it's quite different to the first track we heard. I've learnt my lesson. The vibe is completely different. I think the main thing which I can kind of hear when I'm comparing old Shamble and new Shamble is the drumming. Because James Duff, the old drummer of the Shamble, has such like a jungly kind of vibe to it, which I think added to your reputation as like a jangly pop band back when you were playing a lot more of that kind of stuff. It is interesting.
Yeah. He was a very kind of melodic drummer, as of oxymoronic as that might sound. He would often, I suppose, especially in Seen Better Days, actually, and listening back, it does feel like he's almost trying to drum along with the melody. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't necessarily have been a problem if the sort of bass player was kind of holding down a kind of cohesive rhythm. Unfortunately, the bass also tended to follow the guitar.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of added to this, not necessarily empty sound, but it did feel like there was something, just something missing.
There's a lot going on in the mix as well, which is the thing, because Evan, the old bassist, he always used he used a chorus on his bass, didn't he? And that was always quite interesting. That was always quite interesting because that became like a characteristic of the Shamble when I was listening to it whilst I was mixing it. But now that that's not a thing, I've realized that it really wasn't a necessary thing.
No, yeah. There's sort of no right or wrong way to be in the band. I don't want to sound as if I'm slagging off the old members, because I'm not at all.
No,
we're just a different band now, and we've sort of moved on a little bit, and I think we've kind of matured in songwriting style, in everything. And that's just sort of the way of it. And I think kind of changing up the rhythm section was something that, although I didn't know at the time, we needed. Yeah. Like it needed to happen.
Would you say that in the evolution which you've had within the band itself, would you say that your songwriting has improved as well, as in lyrically for you, and what you've specifically been outputting?
I think I've certainly become more comfortable and a bit braver.
Yeah.
The very early Shamble stuff, I was policing myself. I was very much kind of overthinking it to the point of underthinking it, and making it very, very simplistic. Whilst now I've sort of embraced this reputation I've somehow garnered as being this rather pretentious, articulate gentleman that stands at the front and talks down to people. I've somewhat attempted to almost embrace that and use the varied lexicon at my disposal to make my songs as interesting and unique as possible. I don't like using the same words twice in songs. I like to really build a big kind of lyrical variation across the whole set of Shamble songs. Yeah,
I think that's a really important thing. I think I've praised your songwriting pretty much throughout the entirety of this episode so far, but I'll praise it again by saying I think you do a very good job.
Thank you.
If you work with people who are like-minded, you get along with them, the whole process is so much easier, a lot more fun. And I feel like that's very important to have that chemistry. Even if you're only going in to make a song or two, and if you're like getting paid for it, sometimes the money doesn't like speak enough words as the chemistry and friendship you build in an environment where you're making music, because it's so important to have that kind of relationship with a musician as a producer. And I think that's something which I appreciate the most when I'm working with artists. And I really value that. And I think the Shamble are a very, very good example of it.
Interact with a wide scope of human as they work on their art in front of you. And really get to see people at their bare bones, I suppose, when they're putting their heart on the line in their music or lyrics. I
love watching it all unfold.
So who's been the most interesting person that you've worked with in the studio?
Oh, I don't know, because they're all different. I mean, I'm just talking about the 10 lucky artists we have now. The most interesting people who I've worked with, it's interesting and most I think, telling of artists which I've had come in and record with me are Mickey Blouse from Sheffield. I think it was really interesting to work on their music because they have a vibe which I think a lot of indie artists in York don't really have. The way that we put the whole thing together in the studio, it happened so fast. I mean, we've only really worked on one song, but it was so much fun, and I think that was one of the most telling of experiences in the studio because we got the whole song finished in like an hour, and we just recorded drums, guitar, and bass just immediately after each other, and just like so quick. And the song is like, it's so simple, but it's like really, really like chill and nice. And I don't know, it was just a really calm experience. It's the most calm experience I've had of recording someone. In terms of the most stressful one for me was, and luckily with the Shamble, I've always been able to give you. Well, you're very, very, very prepared when you go into the studio, which I'm very appreciative of. But I do like to remind...
when you have Don as a guitarist.
Well, yeah, exactly.
He's perfectionism galore.
He is a perfectionist, which I think is great. But I do think it's really important not to limit yourself to what you think you can do before the studio. And this is what I remember talking to you guys before the first time I recorded with you, how the producer there was another studio in York who I won't name, who you were going to work with, and Don was telling me how he said that you shouldn't really experiment when you go into the studio, and my kind of input was it was me trying to say that's the only thing you should be doing is experimenting in the studio, because it's so important to use that space to figure out how you want it to sound. You can't go into a studio expecting you know exactly what it's going to sound like in the end. I think that's an awful kind of ethos to have. And that's why I'm so grateful that we had the time to kind of figure everything out which we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think when it comes to kind of working on the tracks in the studio, you hear the tones of the guitar very differently. Mm-hmm. You're suddenly isolating these individual little twinges and twangs of someone's voice or someone's bass playing or someone's drumming or someone's guitar strumming, and it's lovely to watch all these kind of ideas fall into the melting pot as Donna sits in the booth kind of, you know, turning up the distortion and whatnot to experiment around. It's wonderful. It's
quite savage and grilling having to like make sure every single part is perfect, because although it may sound like perfect in the mix, listening to it like on its own, it's very easy to critique it. But that's kind of the fun part of being in the studio, because when it all comes together, it always sounds quite genuine when it's music like what you guys do or what some of the other bands who I've worked with do. I think it's really important. Yeah, I don't know if you agree.
Definitely. No, 100%. Kind of going in, you know, sort of like adding, for me specifically, adding in kind of falsettos.
Yeah, that I remember doing that for the first time. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it's something I've never really sung in. I mean, learned my lesson is quite a high register.
Yeah.
But reaching that kind of falsetto to have a sort of the underlying background, which you've done in a couple of the new singles, and we sort of did in Seen Better Days and Keeping Up the Neighbours as well, from the first EP. It was something I didn't know I could even do up to that point, bar, you know, singing along to Smith's songs where Morrissey reaches them, and you know, B, something I would have never thought about sticking in. And as you're sort of saying about experimenting around, that was very much an experimental period. If it didn't sound good, we could have just cut it out. And if it did, we kept it in. And as it happened, it sounded absolutely stunning.
It was a lot of fun.
And that's got to go to your credit, I think. There.
I think I'm really glad because I think it's a really cool thing to do when you're experimenting. A lot of it you can do with vocals, because when you're listening to like a professional song, or like a song like from bands like the Smiths, I'm sure in the background people have put like extra layers on top, which you can barely hear. But when you know the kind of techniques and you put it in there yourself for your own songs, it's so nice to be like, oh my god, that's us. And falsetto like that is very hard to get right, but once you nail it and once you put it in there and it works, it just brings a completely different tone.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's the bit I point out whenever I'm showing people my music. I love to highlight that. It's interesting. It's a bit unique as well. It really, really adds to this kind of tapestry, especially when you reach these big climaxes of songs, and suddenly you've got all these different voices appearing out of nowhere. It's wonderful. Absolutely sounds gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. So I think we've got about like 10 minutes left of this one. Every single episode, I plan on doing a little segment where people name things, as many things as possible in the space of 1 minute.
Right.
And I did this with Jordan, and I'm going to do the same thing with you, but from a more songwriter's perspective. So in 1 minute, I'm going to set a timer as well. Can you name as many artists as possible who have at all ever influenced your lyric writing or songwriting, starting now?
Chris Difford from Squeeze. Steve Marriott from Small Faces, Ray Davies from The Kinks, Pete Townsend songwriting with The Who, definitely Morrissey, of course. Pete Doherty's poetry has been a wonderful influence for me. The songwriting that went into the Shangri-Las was absolutely brilliant. James Mercer from The Shins, the Shop Assistants from the 1980s, the Skints had a lot of influence on me. I think Miles Kane I listened to a lot when I was sort of growing up in terms of lyrical melody.
He's cool.
Julia Jacqueline's very miserable music has gone into it a lot. How long have I got?
You've got 20 seconds.
Paul Weller has done a lot for me as well, the kind of mod influences. The band James has got a lot of very good lyrics, hence the name. The Clash, Joe Strummer from The Clash, his political side is absolutely fantastic. The Cars and their kind of jaggedy building of melodies is fantastic.
Time. Oh my god! I didn't expect you to be so just like naming them like so quick like that, and having like naming the actual members as well. It's quite hard for a lot of people to be like to be able to remember exactly who's in what band when there's so many out there. That's quite a list. That was quite a list.
Well, I mean, I sort of grew up on just listening. And I think a lot of the stuff that goes very unnoticed with the Shamble stuff, and people don't often pick up on, is the massive soul influence on my lyric writing. Mm-hmm. There's a huge impact from people like Jimmy Forrest and Cozy Cole and sort of artists like that. Aretha Franklin has had a huge impact on me. Sam Cooke is one of my favourite artists ever, and I think there's a lot more soul influence than people maybe pick up on in the Shamble lyric writing. Yeah,
I'm not a big soul man. I don't really know. I'm not very well versed in the artists. I do have an Ella Fitzgerald vinyl though, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm so glad I have that from my mum. And I think if Shamble are influenced by soul, maybe I should give them a bit more of a chance.
Oh, I mean, there is some really, really, really lovely kind of up-tempo soul stuff, like Sugar Dumpling or The Snake. The Snake by Al Wilson, Sugar Dumpling by Sam Cooke are lovely, lovely songs. And I'd highly recommend. I
mean, one artist that you talked about, which we haven't actually spoken in depth about, was Morrissey. I think it's quite interesting hearing what people think about Morrissey. I think me and Jordan briefly talked about him, but yeah, what do you think about Morrissey, James?
Well, I mean, this is clearly a loaded question about his political views.
No, it's not. It's not. I'm literally just wondering about what you think about him as a musician.
Let's just say that the Morrissey that existed from 1982 to 1987 and the Morrissey that existed post that, in my mind, are two very different people. Right. And the 82 to 87 Morrissey was one of the only people in music that I've ever been able to properly relate to and felt understood me and understood my awkwardness with the world around me.
Yeah.
The Morrissey post that, Steve and Patrick, is someone who I don't think many people would want, and I don't think an expat living in LA should have any opinion on British politics and immigration. But that's all I'm going to say on that.
I mean, yeah, Morrissey is an interesting character. I think most people could use a lot of hateful words towards him if they're going to describe what he's like as a person. But I think we'll just leave it at that. Wow. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming on. We've talked about a ton of stuff. I think your whole ethos and ideas about lyric writing and being a genuine songwriter is so important. I think people should really take that away from, if you got this far, really take that away from this episode. If you are a songwriter yourself, or you are someone who's endeavoring in any kind of like creative arts, I think just make art for yourself and it will come out very genuine, I think.
Yes, there's no purer form of art than that art that is authentic. Yeah.
If you were going to give any kind of advice for someone who's starting out in music or art in general in York, or just as a student anywhere in the UK, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, interesting. I think really, really spend time to get to know yourself. You can't make art for other people if you can't make art for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Would be my advice. I think I spent a lot of time sitting around in my sort of bedroom, hiding away from the sun, scribbling poor poetry.
Yeah.
I think really go for metaphor. Stay away from being on the nose and blunt, because that comes across clumsy and quite tacky, I think.
Yeah, that'll be the closing words then. So thank you so much for coming on. So nice to talk about all of this. And I'll see you soon. But thank you everyone for listening in.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Mr. Gulliver.
Thank you very much. And see you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.